Have you ever had to force yourself to stay awake going through training? Have you ever been so distracted by bad training design that you couldn't focus on what you were learning? Could be the UI, the graphics, or insanely boring delivery. It can be absolutely frustrating, especially if there's a test involved and you keep getting the answers wrong. And then you're forced to go through the whole training again. And it's not even your fault, it's just really bad training design. The feeling of frustration for poor training design is amplified in VR. So, today we're going to explore what makes VR training compelling and effective. And I'm going to talk about how we can prevent that amplified frustration you get in VR when things don't go well. Most of my professional XR UX design experience is with VR training. And since I love researching and learning and then teaching that to others, for funsies, I spent over 43 hours playing through training games and VR training experiences on live stream to see how other people are solving the problem of training, and to see what works and what doesn't work based on my own design experience. I also use the knowledge I gained by conducting usability testing on my own VR training projects. And so I analyze these experiences on live stream based on that previous knowledge and based on a set of standard best practices. Kind of like competitive landscaping and expert UX reviews all rolled into one. And these standards that I used included the XR UX best practices that I've written, as well as the pillars of gaming UX as defined by Celia Hodent in her book, The Gamer's Brain. And these are the experiences that I studied: Rover Mechanic Simulator, which is a 2D desktop game on Steam; Car Mechanic Simulator, also a 2D desktop game on Steam. I studied Wrench Game on both the desktop and VR version through Oculus Desktop. I used the Rift version for both Oculus First Steps and First Contact, and I studied Fire Safety VR Training, which is a PC based VR training experience available on Steam. I was going to include more actual VR training experiences, but they were so poorly optimized for CPU performance that I was worried they were going to fry my PC, especially after one of them crashed my computer. And that in itself can teach us a very valuable lesson about optimizing our VR experiences for performance. The reason I chose both desktop games and VR experiences is that game design has a heavy and direct influence on VR design, and it's worth studying since the mental models carry over. And 2D experiences are also worth studying so that we can do the mental exercise of thinking about how we might convert existing 2D training into VR training. You can watch all 43 plus hours of this research right here on my YouTube channel if you're interested, and if you want to help out the algorithm. But over a series of upcoming videos, I'm taking all 43 hours of that research and advice that did not get lost in a crash, and I'm condensing that down into a digestible chunks for you. So first things first, we have to remember the goal of VR training. The ultimate goal of VR training is to immerse people into the subject matter without being distracted by the tech. People need to be able to focus on the actual stuff they're supposed to be learning, and the technology should not get in the way of that. But we can get so caught up in the process and the technical aspects that we can lose sight of that very seemingly simple goal. You can learn more about the process in our upcoming VR training design course. But regardless of whether you're dealing with a top level AAA quality VR training experience or an experience that's poorly designed or poorly executed, there's one overarching thing that affects all VR training experiences, and that's the awe factor. There's a reason this became a meme. For those of you that have used VR before, you can probably remember your first time putting on a headset. It can be overwhelming. It can take a while to get your headset and your controller situated. You're absorbing all these different sensory inputs, and it takes a few minutes to get acclimated to a new world. And it's consuming a big chunk of your cognitive focus to take all of that in. And then when you pile on brand new learning content on top of that, it's going to cause information overload. And that makes it very hard to learn and retain anything useful. Think back on your own experience when you first put on a VR headset, or when you tried some new tech, or when you arrived at a new location you've never been before, like a foreign country, or just taking in new information in general. As VR training designers, we need to think about how we can help manage that initial overwhelm so that people can focus on what they need to learn. We need to remember this and take it into account whenever we design a VR training experience. And some of you who are more used to VR may think it's not that big of a deal. You're able to hop right into a VR headset and get straight to the task at hand. But something that a lot of VR creators and early adopters overlook or forget is that if you're on the project team creating the experience, you're not the target audience. You're deeply embedded in the tech. You live and breathe this stuff. So interacting in these virtual worlds is second nature to you. And that highlights why knowing your specific target audience is so critical. You can do this by putting people from your target audience in your target headset and observing where they struggle. See what works and what doesn't work. You, the designer, you, the developer, you on the project team, you are not your target learner, and your own expertise can become a blind spot when you're creating VR training. Remember, like I said, the goal is to learn the content being taught without being distracted trying to figure out how to interact with the virtual world. There's a lot of instructional design theory and usability that informs how you do this. And I'll give you a quick highlight overview of some of the most important concepts over the next few videos. Check out my free Udemy courses to learn more of the foundational aspects of XR/UX design. You can click on the screen right now to check out the full VR training playlist. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you in the next one.